Chapter 17, Excerpted and Adapted, of Lyddie by Katherine Paterson. Doffer. It had been 2 weeks since Lyddie had become ill, and she was so weak that Dr. Morris still refused to let her return to work. When Lyddie wasn't sleeping, she was in bed worrying. "Better rest, Lyddie," Rachel would say every time she tried to get up. "The doctor said." Lyddie hadn't gotten an answer from Charlie about saving the farm from being sold by Uncle Judah. She wrote another letter to her brother. One evening, both Diana and Bridget came to visit Lyddie. Bridget brought more soup from her mother, who was now fully recovered, and a half bottle of Dr. Rush's infallible health pills. Diana handed Lyddie a paper-bound book by Mr. Charles Dickens, entitled American Notes for General Circulation. "Since you're such an admirer of Mr. Dickens, I thought you might like to see what he wrote about factory life in Lowell," Diana said. Lyddie sent Rachel and Bridget down to beg a cup of tea from Mrs. Bedloe. "Diana, I gotta ask you, has Mr. Marsden said anything of me?" "Of course, you're his best girl. When you disappeared, I knew he was wondering where you were. So I asked around and found out how ill you were. A lot of the factory girls have been out with this fever, especially the Irish. There have been many deaths in the acre." Lyddie felt grateful that she hadn't joined the many sick girls who had died. "What exactly did Mr. Marsden say about me?" she asked Diana. "He didn't speak directly to me. He doesn't like to think that you and I are friends, you know. But I know he was worried. He wouldn't want to lose you." "So I still got a place?" Diana looked at her as though she were crazy. "Why on earth not?" "I stomped his foot." "You what?" "I was all a fever, only I didn't know, and he tried to hold me after the rest had gone. He wouldn't let me go, so I stomped down on his foot." "Mr. Marsden is probably more frightened than you are," Diana replied. "If his wife ever found out what he did, he'd be in big trouble." "But maybe he meant nothing. I was burnt up with the fever. Maybe I mistook kindness for... She grimaced. "You know I'm not the kind of girl men look at that way. I'm plain as plowed sod." Diana raised her eyebrows skeptically, but Bridget and Rachel came back in, and nothing more was said. "I want to be a doffer, Lyddie," Rachel said one day. "Oh, Rachel." Lyddie was braiding Rachel's hair and thought how pretty it would look with a ribbon to tie it. "We got to get you into school. You don't want to grow ignorant as your Lyddie." "You ain't ignorant at all. I seed you read." "You want I should read to you, Rachie?" "No, I want you should let me be a doffer." "We'll have to wait and see, eh? When we hear from Charlie." But they didn't hear from Charlie. They heard from Quaker Stevens. "Dear Sister Worthen, thy brother asked me to look into the sale of thy farm. All inquiry has come to naught, but as I have business in thy uncle's neighborhood on Wednesday next, I will inquire directly at that time. I trust thee and the little one are in good health. Son Luke asks to be remembered to thee. Thy friend and neighbor, Jeremiah Stevens." Lyddie knew that Uncle Judah would have to listen to Quaker Stevens if he tried to stop Judah from selling her family's farm. After all, he was an adult, unlike Charlie. She was glad also to know that Luke had gotten safely home. She had finally realized that the freight he had come to fetch, was human. It was time to find Rachel a way to live without the danger of being kicked out. Lyddie decided Rachel was right and went to ask Mrs. Bedloe to recommend her sister for a job at the factory. Mrs. Bedloe was skeptical. "She's hardly more than a baby," Mrs. Bedloe said. "Rachel's small," Lyddie admitted, "but she's a worker. Didn't she nurse me when I was sick, eh? I'd pay extra if you'd ask the agent to accept her as a doffer." "I'll speak to the agent," Mrs. Bedloe relented, "though I can't promise you that she will get a job." Rachel was indeed accepted at the factory as a doffer. Lyddie dropped her off to the spinning room on her first day back. Rachel seemed happy and excited to begin. In the weaving room, Lyddie went straight to her looms without looking at the overseer. "You're looking much the rosier," Bridget said. How pretty the girl was with her light brown hair and blue eyes. "We covered the machines as best we could while you were gone, me and Diana. Though," she smiled apologetically, "you'll see from your wage the work was not near what it would be had you been here." Lyddie was glad to be back at her looms. At the meals, Rachel encouraged Lyddie to eat well, and each day she grew a little stronger. Lyddie lay in bed one night and realized that now that she lived with her sister, her life felt much happier. Later in the night, she awoke, puzzled. She thought she had heard Betsy again, that wretched, hacking cough. Then she was wide awake and realized it was Rachel. Rachel's cough persisted for days. Lyddie did not know what to do, and she was too afraid to ask anyone. Lyddie fed Rachel the pills Bridget had brought her. She fixed plasters for the child's chest, trying to turn it into a game so as not to worry her little sister. She must get Rachel out of here. The poison air at the factory would only make her worse. She thought of sending Rachel to Tryphena, but how could she send Rachel away alone at age 8? Lyddie herself had found that life hard and lonely, even at age 13. Then one evening in late June, after Lyddie had just read Rachel to sleep, Tim knocked on the door. "A visitor for you, Lyddie," he said. "In the parlor."